Picture this. It's the dead of night, just 3 days after 5 shadowy figures are caught red-handed inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters. The country is still reeling, trying to make sense of this bizarre break-in. But behind the closed doors of the White House, something even more astonishing is unfolding. The President of the United States, Richard Nixon, is recording a conversation so profoundly incriminating that within a year, his own secretary will sit before investigators, swearing under oath that she accidentally erased 18.5 minutes of it. 18.5 minutes of presidential dialogue gone. That erasure isn't some minor footnote in the Watergate saga. It's the very crime they desperately hoped you would forget. Before we dive in, welcome viewers from around the world. Drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. And if you find this story as gripping as we do, hit that like button. It really helps us bring you more untold stories from history. Now, let's uncover the truth they tried to bury. When most people hear Watergate, they think of familiar images. The break-in at the DNC, the tapes, the resignation. It's a political thriller, a constitutional crisis, a defining moment in American history. But the real scandal wasn't the bungled burglary itself. That was merely the fuse. The true scandal was the systematic, relentless erasure of truth that began the next morning and continued for 2 years. Tonight, we're following that trail from the Oval Office to the Supreme Court through shredded documents, whispered conspiracies, and carefully crafted lies. We won't stop until we reach that pivotal moment when a president realized that if the full truth of one particular tape ever surfaced, he would not survive the week. This is the story of Nixon's crime, the one they tried to erase from history. It was 1:47 a.m. on June 17, 1972. Washington, D.C. slept as Frank Wills, a security guard at the Watergate office complex, noticed something odd. A door latch on the 6th floor had been taped open. He removed the tape and continued his rounds. When he returned, the tape was back. Wills called the police. Inside, they found 5 men in suits, caught burglarizing the Democratic National Committee offices. These weren't ordinary thieves. They carried sophisticated bugging equipment, cameras, and $20,300 in crisp, sequential $100 bills. Within hours, reporters began connecting dots. One burglar, James McCord, was a former CIA operative who served as security chief for Nixon's committee to re-elect the president. Creep. In normal circumstances, this would be a minor scandal, quickly contained. But this wasn't normal. Among the possessions of burglar Eugenio Martinez was a pocket notebook containing a White House phone number belonging to E. Howard Hunt, a former CIA agent in Nixon's Plumbers Unit, a clandestine group tasked with stopping leaks. That single phone number, discovered by the FBI, was the thread that unraveled everything. The trail led straight to the White House. 3 days after the break-in, on June 20, 1972, President Nixon met with Chief of Staff H.R. Bob Haldeman in the Executive Office Building. They needed to discuss the fallout, to contain the crisis. What they didn't know was that a newly installed voice-activated taping system Nixon had ordered was silently recording every word. The conversation lasted 80 minutes. Yet when investigators finally obtained that tape, 18.5 of those minutes had vanished. The surviving fragment begins with Haldeman stating, "The FBI is not under control." It ends with Nixon saying, "We have to protect the plan." Whatever sat between those 2 lines became the stuff of legend. Rosemary Woods, Nixon's personal secretary, eventually claimed responsibility. Her explanation: while transcribing, her foot slipped, hitting the wrong pedal on the Uher 5000 tape recorder, engaging both record and play simultaneously for 18.5 straight minutes. In a contorted posture, later known as the Rosemary Stretch. Forensic audio engineers found at least 5 separate erasures within that gap. Each was pressed harder than the last, suggesting deliberate effort rather than accident. The silence of those 18.5 minutes spoke volumes. It was a crime committed through the deletion of history itself. While newspapers chased shadows, the Nixon White House launched full-scale damage control. Files disappeared from committee safes. Memos were retyped, scrubbed clean of incriminating initials. Cash in Mexican bank envelopes was quietly delivered to the burglars' wives, hush money to ensure silence. The cover-up reached the highest levels. Haldeman called CIA Deputy Director Vernon Walters, requesting a national security blanket, code for telling the FBI to back off. Walters refused, understanding the dangerous precedent this would set. But the mere fact of the request revealed how deep the conspiracy ran. Yet the public saw none of this. Polls in August 1972 showed Nixon leading Democrat George McGovern by 24 points. The conventional wisdom: no story here. The break-in seemed like a minor political prank, nothing that should derail a popular president heading for landslide victory. The illusion held. The summer of '72 was a summer of shredding, silence, and public complacency. The truth remained buried beneath lies and indifference. The illusion cracked in September. A Miami bank teller noticed something unusual: a $25,000 campaign check made out to Nixon for President, endorsed by Kenneth Dahlberg, a creep fundraiser, but deposited into the account of Watergate burglar Bernard Barker. 2 young Washington Post reporters, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, pulled that thread. Fueled by tips from a mysterious source called Deep Throat, they uncovered a secret fund controlled by Nixon's campaign finance chairman, Maurice Stans. The amount, $700,000 in cash, kept in a safe behind his desk. Officially for intelligence gathering, the money actually funded political sabotage against Democratic opponents. On October 10, 1972, the Post's front page screamed, "FBI finds Nixon aides sabotage Democrats." The story detailed a vast operation linking Watergate to widespread political sabotage from within Nixon's campaign. 2 million copies sold. Yet 3 weeks later, Nixon won in a historic landslide, carrying 49 of 50 states. Voters had heard the accusations. They simply didn't believe it mattered. The $25,000 check had refused to vanish, but its truth was largely ignored, a ticking time bomb buried beneath electoral euphoria. By spring 1973, complacency evaporated. The Senate Watergate Committee, led by Senator Sam Ervin, held televised hearings that captivated the nation. For the first time, Americans watched witnesses reveal shocking details of the cover-up. Polls flipped. 67% now believed the president was hiding something. The game changer came with revelation of Nixon's taping system. If those tapes existed, they held undeniable evidence. Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox issued a subpoena. Nixon offered a compromise. Democratic Senator John Stennis, hard of hearing and in his 70s, would listen to the tapes and provide a summary. Cox refused. The tapes must be turned over unedited. On October 20, 1973, Nixon ordered Attorney General Elliot Richardson to fire Cox. Richardson refused and resigned. Nixon turned to Deputy Attorney General William Ruckelshaus, who also refused and was fired. Finally, Solicitor General Robert Bork, now acting Attorney General, reluctantly signed the order. In one night, the top 2 justice officials were gone, and the special prosecutor was dismissed. The press dubbed it the Saturday Night Massacre. Public reaction was volcanic. 3 million telegrams swamped Congress. Citizens felt a line had been crossed. For the first time, impeachment became not just a whisper, but a real possibility. In trying to bury the truth, Nixon had only buried himself deeper. After the massacre, pressure mounted. Under court order, Rosemary Woods delivered the Uher 5000 tape recorder to Judge John Sirica. Government audio forensic specialists examined the magnetic fields on the tape. Their findings, the 18 1-2-minute gap, consisted of 5 to 9 separate erasures, each pressed deeper and more deliberately than the last. This wasn't an accidental slip, it was sustained obliteration. Woods maintained her story, even recreating the contorted Rosemary stretch for photographers. Pictures showed her in an almost gymnastic pose, one foot stretched to hit both pedals simultaneously, body twisted improbably. Comedians mocked it, but the gravity was lost on no one. Yet, without the actual audio, prosecutors faced a massive evidentiary hole. They had to argue that erasure itself was admission of guilt, a monumental legal challenge. What they didn't know was that another tape, recorded days later, had escaped the desperate erasure efforts. That tape would ultimately seal the president's fate. On July 23, 1974, the Supreme Court ruled 8-0 in United States v. Nixon that the president must release the tapes. Executive privilege was rejected. No one, not even the president, was above the law. Among the released tapes was a conversation from June 23, 1972, 6 days after the break-in, 3 days after the gap tape. In it, Nixon and Haldeman discussed getting the CIA to tell the FBI to stay the hell out of this investigation, citing false national security concerns. This was the president, in his own voice, explicitly ordering obstruction of justice. When released on August 5, 1974, the impact was devastating. Even the most loyal Republicans could no longer defend him. The tape proved beyond doubt that Nixon had personally orchestrated the cover-up from the beginning. Support vanished overnight. 10 Republican congressmen delivered brutal news to Nixon. He had maybe 15 Senate votes against conviction. Not nearly enough. By August 7th, the unthinkable was drafted, plans for resignation. The date? August 9th at noon. The leader of the free world was brought down not by enemies, but by his own words on a tape he forgot to erase. Nixon spent his last night as president in the Lincoln Salon, burning personal notes in the fireplace. Throughout the West Wing, staffers fed stacks of documents into shredders. The whirring sound of destruction filled the air, a desperate attempt to erase evidence in the final hours. Some material was lost forever, leaving permanent gaps in the historical record. Boxes of tapes were loaded onto a helicopter and flown to Camp David for safekeeping, not to the National Archives. Even in his final moments, Nixon sought to control the narrative. Some material would prove difficult to retrieve for decades. The next morning, the East Room was packed. Nixon flashed his signature victory sign, now tragically out of place, and boarded Air Force One for California. A photographer captured an iconic shot, a disgraced president waving goodbye. In the background, an aide carried a manila folder stamped "Top Secret." That folder would disappear, resurfacing decades later in a private library. The final shredding was complete, but the ghosts of what was lost would haunt history for generations. Watergate isn't just about a break-in. It's a masterclass in how power tries to delete its own footprints. The erased 1812 minutes speak volumes, humming with the static of unspoken truths. The shredded memos represent systematic attempts to dismantle evidence. The lies delivered under oath were part of a grand design to make truth optional. But they failed. They failed because ordinary people, civil servants who refused to compromise, reporters who wouldn't stop digging, judges who upheld the rule of law, believed that no one is above the law. Their commitment to truth brought down an administration that had grown arrogant. The next time you hear a politician dismiss uncomfortable truth as nothing, remember the 1812-minute gap. Remember how it still hums with static, a reminder of what was almost lost. Democracy survives only when citizens remain vigilant, when we insist on hearing what the powerful don't want us to know, when we demand accountability and refuse to let history be erased. The crime they tried to erase became the thing that etched itself most deeply into our collective memory. If this journey through power and truth resonated with you, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more deep dives into history's compelling narratives. Drop a comment with the one Watergate fact you can't believe isn't taught in every school. We'll see you in the next one.